Get this going. Oh, well, welcome back from last week, most of us anyway. And something I was talking about to Nick before, coming from the Essene Gospel of Peace. It's not in the Bible, but the Essene Gospels were translated in the 1970s when they were discovered in whatever cave they got them out.
Can you repeat it? What was discovered in the 70s? What was discovered in the 70s?
The Essene Gospel of Peace. You can actually look it up online and you can read it through, and it's pretty high stuff. Yeah. And I picked out this particular quote from that Gospel, and I'll just read it out. The Essene Gospel of Peace, where Jesus answers, "Scripture is the work of man. Life are the work of God. God wrote laws not in pages of books, but in our hearts and our spirit, in our breath, our blood, bones, flesh, bowels, eyes and ears. It's also present in the air, the water and earth, in plants and in sunbeams, in the depths and the heights, in the grass, tree, river, in the mountain, birds of heaven, fishes of the sea, and chiefly in ourselves. Law is life, whereas Scripture is dead." And what I take as Scripture is the law books, right? Or you could even say the books, the Holy Bible is also a work of Scripture, but it's not a living thing, right? Perhaps they're only guidelines, and we should treat them as that rather than them becoming our master.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
So that's.
And he didn't write the book.
Sorry?
Others wrote the book for him 100 years later. Jesus didn't write the book.
Look, I don't know.
Yeah, that was
You're going into other territory
as well, I think.
Who knows? Or 100 years later.
Yeah,
it's right.
exactly.
Yeah. Go on.
And then you don't know how often it's been translated.
Yeah, it was translated. I've done a study with that next slide because I think it was quite Christians otherwise. And it was written by people that were disciples of the disciples. Okay, they weren't actually disciples themselves. But anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll get back to the agenda. Of course, that's on tonight. We'll talk about that later.
Yep.
And the agenda I got from last week. I've written it up and I sent it out by email as well. But what it says is, I'll just show you this. This is the poster that I originally put out. Eliminate tax consciousness. Because I say it's a consciousness problem. Right? We've been brainwashed into thinking that we need to pay tax in order to have services, in order to have infrastructure. But I want to show you a couple of things which questions that, right? And I've put some of the words on that here as well. Taxation is spiritually immoral, a primitive understanding of leadership and management. And that's not my words, that's coming out of some of this material, which is comes from a fifth dimensional perspective. Right? Whether you believe it or not, well, just consider the information coming out here. I'm not asking anyone to believe anything, right? But perhaps there's some wisdom there we can build up on. The taxation is not required for infrastructure nor services. Banks create money out of thin air. We know that, don't we?
Yes.
Whenever you get a loan...
Currency, not money.
Well, it becomes...
Money is gold, silver.
Well, they type it up on their computers, and all of a sudden you've got a loan.
It's a
And that's
digital
used as money.
It's a digital entity.
It's not a loan.
They call it a loan.
Yeah. But
Right?
it's not really a loan.
They're not getting it out of the vault.
Yeah.
Right? It's not coming
So what
from
is it?
gold. It's not coming from
Create out of
something
thin air.
which is already there. They're just creating it. Right?
Yeah.
And these are private banks.
Right.
Right?
ANZ does it, they all do it.
Yeah,
So are we talking about cryptocurrency being out of thin air? Is that what you're saying?
No.
pretty much.
All currency?
Well,
Fiat
not all of it. Not all of
But
it, but there's something called fractional
That's got
banking.
nothing to do with Bitcoin.
And fractional banking means the money that you've got in the vault is actually lent out 10 times over, or it could be 100 times over.
Fiat currency is paper money.
Yes, okay. So if the banks, if private banks can do it, how come the highest law of the land, the people cannot? How come we can't do it? Well, of course we can, right? And I'll show you some examples, right? And again, you know, the bottom part of this, I'm saying it's a consciousness, not a legal problem. We need more of the population to understand what's going on here. Anyway, from last week, this is my agenda points that I put together from last week. Even though I don't like these tools, the talking stick, I prefer to avoid them, but I think it's necessary.
Yes,
Yeah.
very good.
Because we do interrupt each other. It took a long time to get through everybody's introductions last week because there was so much to say, everybody wanted to say. And so I think we're going to have to rely on this, and that's what was found in the garden. It's kind of twisted and it looks like a bit of a pistol, you know. You better shut up, you know. So I thought maybe it's better to use this. We've used this before. This is the rule of law, you know. Okay, the ruler, and we can hand it around a little bit easier perhaps as well. And I use it in my yoga classes as well. I say I use straight.
You use it to smack people, don't you?
I don't think I'm going to spank them, but it's not true. Right?
It's not
Right,
that
so-
kind of class, is it?
Okay, go on. It's very gentle.
Yeah, I've called these primitive tools of communication, and the only reason we need them, is because we're not in control. It's the mark of a primitive.
So simple.
That's the problem.
No, it serves a purpose.
Okay. It's a marker of a primitive society that requires rules, regulations, courts and justice, and even punishment. So what I'm saying, if we were a highly evolved society, we wouldn't need tools like this. We wouldn't need a court system. We wouldn't need the legal system, because everybody is honouring each other,
Respecting.
right? And this is what perhaps makes us different to a lot of the other law groups. There's a number of them. You know, the CLRAs, Know Your Rights, and all that. The perspective I'm coming from is to say this is consciousness. You know, we need to raise the consciousness, and then we won't need that system anymore. I'm even saying don't fight the system, because you're actually giving it more power. They're coming up with new strategies to defeat us. But if you work towards creating an alternative, then it makes the old system redundant. Make sense?
Oh, to me, absolutely.
Okay. A code of conduct that I suggest for these meetings comes from, derives from A Course in Miracles. We've used it in study groups before. And what that says, when somebody's speaking, let other people have their beliefs. Say what you think, but don't make others wrong. Don't disagree with them. Just say what you know is true in a nice way. Then back off, never confront. So that's sort of a guideline. We don't need to fight each other. If somebody's got a different opinion to you, allow them their belief. Yeah?
Live and let live.
Sorry?
Live and let live.
Something like that, yeah.
Everyone's entitled to their
Okay.
opinion.
Another idea which comes from, again, this book. There's other materials that we've used. This one's really powerful. While we love to attack government, it is always a reflection of the collective consciousness. We no longer attract corruption when we ourselves are no longer corrupt. You know, it's just a general statement, but perhaps that's the way it is. We attract the governments that we have. And according to information that we access, and you're very familiar with the prion stuff, we're going to actually see a higher level of government in these coming times. It will be less and less corrupt. It will be more enlightened. So according to that information, we're going to come out of the mess we're in. But it's going to take time, it's going to take work, and maybe that's what we're doing here today. Last week we asked the volunteers to download, read and analyse the following documents. Remember that I asked that last week? I presented some of the documentation like what are we paying tax for, the income tax, the root of all evil. These are documents, some of them are quite big, but if we can individually study these and perhaps present their findings, then we can have a better idea of what other work has happened in the past for developing the idea that maybe we don't need tax. Anyway, that's my suggestion. And this particular one here, Australian companies paying no tax, I think I showed that last week, showing that about 40% of Australian companies don't pay any tax, and they're big companies. Now, we're talking about billions of dollars of revenue or turnover, and they don't pay any tax. I mean, how come we've got to pay tax on our personal exertion, and then something with big profits doesn't? I can't work that out.
A different set of rules
Perhaps, yeah.
for the rich, they don't pay tax. No.
And that's my next point. Tax applies to an enterprise deriving profit, according to information that I've studied. But does it apply to personal exertion? It never used to apply to personal exertion before the Second World War in Australia. There was no income tax. That was brought in to help the war effort, but they kept it going after the war. And we seem to be paying taxation to fund very lucrative salaries to some of these administrators, and that doesn't seem right to me. Yeah, instead of calling it public service, it's become a corporatised system. We've got CEOs, we've got executive management, and they're earning pretty big bucks. Yeah. Anyway.
You've got 3 to 4 times the amount of people in civil service that there needs to be. That's one of the big problems where the money gets drained in Western society.
Into civil service.
Generally.
But haven't most of those public service utilities, or whatever you want to call them, haven't they been privatised? Haven't we sold Qantas? We sold Ansett?
It's still there, but there's still the amount of people in civil service.
We sold all the utilities.
Yeah, but it hasn't gone down. The number of people hasn't gone down. It's still increasing.
It might have gone up. Who knows?
Well, it hasn't gone down.
But the SEC, we
That's
seem
a massive drain.
Yeah, but we seem to have had better services in the past at lower cost. Now that it's been privatised, and that's supposed to create competition and make things better for us. But I don't see the evidence of that.
Evidence of what?
Once these enterprises have been privatised, do the services...
You mean the need for it? No, there isn't the need for it, but the number of civil servants hasn't gone down.
Yeah, sure.
That's the point.
Maybe it's gone up.
Well, it hasn't gone
I've
down.
seen some statistics on that, and you could be right.
Yeah. Why that selling off occurred?
Sorry?
Why the selling off occurred, as far as I understand it, or my thinking is that they sold it off to get money into the coffers of the government, so that they could use.
Well, I saw some recent figures. The Commonwealth Bank, it was sold for $9 billion. Right? However, the
What are they making you?
profit of the Commonwealth Bank exceeds every year exceeds what they sold it for.
Yeah, it's about 11 billion next year.
So there's no logic to it.
Of course there is. It was done to raise money.
Anyway, yeah, but you sell something off, and yet the enterprise, the Commonwealth Bank, was earning more than what they sold it for per year.
But you're asking idiots to be logical, you see. This is
Yeah,
the
that's
point.
right.
Carry on,
Yeah.
shut up.
Okay. We suggested last week that we live in a predatory universe. and the adversity is a means for the universe to evolve. So while we have difficult circumstances in our lives, we don't evolve without adversity. So perhaps there's a higher agenda. We're actually evolving through that process. And if you look at the human race, it's rather primitive. There might be some agreement from that, and that's not surprising. We haven't been on the earth for that long. It sounds like we were seeded through prior races. I don't know how long ago, but we're a pretty new species in the universe on this planet, from what I can see. Yeah, lots of information on that.
We are relatively recent.
Yeah, whereas there might be races out there throughout the galaxy, throughout the universe, that have been in existence for millions of years. Yeah. And so they've taken a much higher evolution steps than ours. And some of them, from what we understand, are benevolent, and some of them are not, but they're malevolent. Right? The benevolent ones prevent the malevolent ones from taking over the earth completely. That's from quite a bit of information I've worked with. Yeah. Anyway, last week one of the attendees suggested a meditation, but a couple of people objected to that.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, all phones off.
Yeah, I'll turn it off. I think mine still rings. Would you believe it's one of those?
I would have thought a meditation was a good idea, because everything that we create in this realm starts with a vision or a thought. And if the vision is somehow flawed, then everything below it is also flawed. And last week I talked about the 3 tools of creation, which are thought, word and deed. And if you're only doing deed, if you're only fighting the system without vision, you're keeping very busy, but you don't get anything done. Right? That's according to this information. If you only have vision, though, if you only have thought, you're just a dreamer and you don't get anything done again. The word part of it represents communication, the power of the collective. And the suggestion is that we need all 3 tools in order to create thought, word and deed. Right? So a meditation, a vision based on the highest, grandest vision we can possibly imagine, it's something that can be used, and then you work backwards from there. That makes sense? Anyway, that's just a philosophical...
There's no objective means of determining whether a vision is perfect or not.
Well, we're focusing on what would you like to focus if you had a vision of how we can live together and prosper?
Do no harm and understand from anybody else's experience that you meet. But it's like, my attitude is we're on a, what do they call those wheels that mice run, or exercise wheel. Yeah, we're in the last throes of being able to survive. I mean, this thing with David Icke, he says his name, it's draconian.
Well, David Icke has been refused access into Australia.
Yeah.
Why?
Oh well. Who
That
knows?
tells us the truth, which is in conflict with government policy.
What?
Which is in conflict with government policy.
You mean
Anyway, the point is,
talk about the truth and I don't want to hear?
the point is, I say that a vision is a very important thing. When we started this place, we had a mission statement, and the mission statement is what we worked from, for 14 years. I think it's very important to have a defining...
Has it worked?
I think so. Not everything, but I think by sticking to that vision,
Put in the right direction.
yeah. If there is something called grace, which is higher dimensional beings helping us, then
Have to open the door.
Yeah, that's right. We have to initiate. What is it that we require in our lives? If we don't initiate, the higher beings don't know what to do. And they're only there to help us. They're not there to tell us what to do. Anyway, that's a whole new subject. But on the thought, word and deed aspect, I did a little bit of research online, and the world's greatest achievers use similar tools. And I've seen it as vision, passion and action. And you could do this research yourself. Look up online what the highest achievers of the world, what tools they use. They use vision, passion and action, which is pretty much thought, word and deed. My next point is we've suggested taxation as a topic, a little bit like maybe Ghandi chose salt to take back a nation. What I'm saying is, I've said this quote before: taxation is a manipulative material creation, spiritually immoral, and a primitive understanding of leadership and management. And there's a whole chapter of information in here which I wouldn't mind sharing at some stage, based on that one statement. Where the information comes from, these alternative societies are radically different from ours. For example, there is no concept of ownership. There is only stewardship, right? And that's very different to the way we work. And yet, this sort of consciousness is achievable in this society. It's supposed to be the next evolving step for the human
That would be
race.
interesting to discuss, difference between ownership and stewardship. That would be an interesting subject to discuss.
Yes, yeah, we've studied a lot of that material through other books, the Conversation with God material, for example. Remember the study groups that we were running?
Yeah,
couple
I
of
was
years ago.
participating.
These highly evolved attributes do not require proof because they're like legal maxims. They are self-evident. And I've put this to people before. Is there any life elsewhere in the universe? And people say, well, there's no evidence of it. No, I don't think there is, but to me it's self-evident. There's got to be other life in the universe. Right? One of the reasons why they haven't revealed themselves to us, according to this book, is that we're still too violent, and they will not reveal themselves to us until we evolve to a higher level, when we start respecting each other. Yeah, because how can we interact with an intergalactic community when we can't even look after ourselves at home? We've got to get this part of our development right here, to learn to live with each other before we're given the keys to go out into the galaxies. Yeah. Anyway, that's just a point of view.
Are we making an assumption there that
Sorry?
they're good guys though?
Say again?
Are we making an assumption there that they're all good guys?
No, they're not all good guys.
No.
According to
What would they make
information
it?
that we've studied and gone through, when a race like the human race gets to this point, right, we're advancing technologically at a steep rate,
At the moment.
right? But we're not advancing spiritually at a high
Not at
rate,
the moment.
right? And so we could end up like a slave race, a slave to that technology. We've got that danger happening happening to us right now.
If AI takes over,
Sorry?
It's already
if
been,
AI takes over, we're
Yeah, that's right.
certainly
Yeah,
going to be
that's
slaves.
exactly
It's
what's happening on the Earth. Right?
5G, A1, it's already visible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening on the Earth right now. And if
Yes.
we're not careful, that's the way it's going to go. But it still doesn't have to go that way. We might be able to raise the consciousness to a level where we don't have to go down that path. And that's the basis of what I want to do with these groups, to try and raise that awareness.
That's a huge subject, though. We could discuss that.
Of course it is. Yeah.
We should do that.
Yeah, I remember back in the 1980s when I was introduced to this information, and it was saying that it's almost definite that we're gonna annihilate each other. We're going to blow up the Earth the way we're going. And according to ancient information, we've done that before. With the Atlantis and Lemurian wars and all that sort of thing.
It's done it 4 times according to Crown. And this,
Yeah.
And this is the 5th time.
And we're in a very dangerous time right now. We could end up blowing ourselves up.
Oh, we've been there for the last 40, 50 years.
Sorry?
We've been there for the last 40, 50 years.
Yeah,
We've escaped annihilation just by...
However, again, according to Cryon, in 1987 we had a worldwide event called the harmonic convergence.
Can you put me, I heard it so often, I have no concept what it really was. What was the harmonic convergence?
It's a series of meditations which were happening simultaneously around the world. I don't know how they organised it. I remember hearing about it when it happened, but I didn't pay attention. I was too much involved with the corporate world at the time. And I would encourage that. We ran a worldwide healing meditation last year with about 300 groups around the world. Right? And we can keep going with that. Every year we should do one of these.
Yeah, I think it's
There was a lady from Gippsland that organised it, and I contacted her and I said, "Do you want to facilitate it here?" And she said yes, and she came here and we had a number of people in the room, and of course we were meditating on positive visions with who knows how many people around the world at the same time. We might have the point of view that it doesn't make any difference. Well, you could be wrong if that's the way you think.
No, I have read about, sorry interrupting, I have read about, in America, I can't remember which cities, where there was lots of crime. They actually had done measurements and experimented with
Yes.
meditation, and they actually could statistically confirm that through meditation the crime rate had reduced.
Yes, if you go online and you search that topic, you will find lots of hits on it.
I have read that, but
Yeah,
that is in 3D concepts being confirmed statistically.
Yes, you can go online and you can search that exact topic and you'll find lots and lots of hits. How they've shown scientifically that meditation changes paradigm.
Yes.
And the big one happened in 1987, and it raised the level of humanity or of awareness to a point where we didn't have to annihilate each other.
That's when crime came in.
Because I remember back in 1984, whatever it was, and I came across this information, and it's saying there's almost no doubt we're going to annihilate each other. And I'm going.
It looked like. Yes.
I'm going like this. No, can't be. I can't stand this, And perhaps that got myself and maybe millions of other people to change their consciousness and start healing the earth. I started doing daily meditations on healing the earth. And there's other material that I came across which was very powerful for doing that sort of thing. Right? Anyway, another point that I've got here is, do we use democracy, for these groups? Democracy, from what I can tell, marginalises minorities. Say you get 70% of the room.
You know, interrupt, I can smell some
Sorry,
burning.
go on.
I can smell some burning. Paul, have you left anything in the kitchen? No? I can smell some burning.
Oh, the stove's on, is it?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, you're right. Democracy marginalises minorities. If you're part of the minority, then you can get trodden on. Whereas, from information that we work with, it's consensus that highly evolved societies use.
It's usually the grill place over there that's got that big, push
Was this not us? That's right.
Yeah, so
Oh, thanks for raising that. Consensus is the model that highly evolved societies use. Indigenous groups use consensus. In other words, if one person does not agree, then the motion is not carried. Now that's kind of difficult in a westernised mindset, right? And I've said here, minorities still have to prove their case. In other words, I got this from communities that have been set up worldwide. They're westernised, but they want to use consensus. And because of the westernised mindset, which is very individual, we're very individual people, and we want our opinion heard and all this, they came up with modified consensus. And so if one person disagrees, or even a couple of people, they have to form a committee to find out why they're disagreeing. Because what they're disagreeing about might be totally valid. And that can then be brought to the entire group and then re-examined. Does that make sense? Right? Instead of democracy, which marginalises minorities, it's supposed to be consensus. That's the highly evolved way. Yeah. Anyway, that's what I'm proposing.
Is that somebody else's opinion, or is that what you're proposing?